Welcome, one and all, to Liberty After Dark live stream. We hope that you enjoy the show and will engage in the conversation along with us. So, without further ado, here's your host, Christian Moore.
There we go. Now you should be able to hear me. There we go. Yeah, so just a fair warning before we do anything. Oh, of course, my dog wants to go out. Hold on. Before we get this ball rolling, I am going to go ahead and warn you guys. I am a bit sniffly. I like it better there. I'm sorry that I did not get the podcast out for last week's episode. I will be doing that this week. And as much as I wanted this episode to just be about the awesome Liberty things that have happened over the past however long, however year, not however long, but over 2019, I do think that we kind of have to talk about Iran at least a little bit. We can talk about that as much as you guys want, but it's gotta, we gotta talk about it. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it as far as like things I need to preface. If you guys don't mind, I'm gonna go. I need to get a water real quick. I didn't prepare very well. I thought I was good, but I just yeah, I gotta go get a drink real fast, and then we'll get this properly started. Just let me throw this yeah, here we go. All right, cool, sweet. If you're still here, thanks. Sorry about that. Actually, I'm gonna set this up here. Man, you get off for a week and then nothing makes sense. Everything seems off. My beard still sucks. It's kind of sort of growing in on the sides, I guess. Not really, but I guess it's better than no beard, so whatever. Yeah, I think we've got everything, so I'm going to hit this record button right here. I'm going to make sure I have some space for it. I did this last time, and I had to download it with all the chops from the YouTubes, and it was not so great. I hated it, so before, you guys get to be a part of all this, seeing as how you guys are here early, you lucky dogs, you... Wow, look at all these that I can just delete. Sweet. All right. I'm going to hit the record button. We are now recording that. This can go away. We can empty this guy. And then I think that's it. Cool. Yeah, we're Gucci. Sweet. All right. How's it going, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to the latest episode of Liberty After Dark, episode 27. I saw, I ran. Obviously, today we're going to be talking a little bit about Iran. I had to kind of put that one in the title there, since that is the hot news of the last, 24 hours now? 48 maybe, at most. So, we are still going to be talking about the Liberty Year in Review. Don't you worry about that. But I feel like we kind of have to touch on Iran a little bit. I know everybody's talking about Iran. It's kind of like, oh my God, another person talking about Iran. But I think we've talked about Iran once before on the show. We kind of went over some of the history of Middle Eastern conflicts. We're going to go a step further than we went last time and go pre-Cold War. Well, beginnings of the Cold War, I guess you could say. And we're going to talk about what led up to the tensions that we have with Iran today. If you guys want. If you guys hate it, then we'll just skip it and we'll move on. But I think you guys will find it pretty interesting. As interesting as I did, at least. So, without further ado, news. We'll get to that in a minute. How about that? We'll just leave all the news for the end. We're going to jump right into things, which we never do. So I don't have my time to warm up this time, but we're going to talk about our year of liberty. We're going to talk about the ways that we got one step closer to being a freer society than we were last year. And like I said when I brought up this idea, it's really easy for us to step back and say, look at how less free we are. And trust me, there are plenty of ways for us to look back and say, look at all the things we've lost. We could do a list right now. The smoking age change. You got bump stocks. Literally, we could do this all day. We could sit here and talk about all the laws that got passed all over. But let's take our W's where we can get them, right? So I think it would be super cool to start out by mentioning just a couple broad things, and then we can start talking about some specific things that I found that I think are really cool, and some groups that I think are really cool, and then we can all just kind of celebrate together that these things are doing their job and are working and are making people freer, and then we can go back to talking about how bad everything is. So, and the first thing that I'd like to start out with is really just like the big national things that everybody sees, okay? Whether or not you like the people pushing the policy, the de-escalation and decriminalization and legalization, which is less cool than decriminalization, but all right, of cannabinoid-related products, the lack of legislation on CBD products, marijuana in general, just substances in general has been laxed on a lot. The thinking on how addiction affects people's lives and how we should respond to that has changed a lot in a great way, especially over the last, I'd say over the last 8 years, but the last 4 years, we've seen things get put into place. And this last year is just a continuation of that are helping minimize the amount of impact that these laws will have on people's lives in the future. So that's something cool, right? We have a lot of states that have passed in 2019. I don't have the full list in front of me, but I know Vermont and a few other states did this. They passed constitutional carry, which is great. I think every state should have constitutional carry. Not that I support the Constitution necessarily, but that I believe constitutional carry is what we as human beings are entitled to as a basic right to self-preservation and defense. So I think those are awesome things that have happened in a couple states. Some already had them. I think this last year was Vermont that passed constitutional carry. So we have guns that are making some pluses in some areas. We have decriminalization of illicit substances. That's making pluses. Oh, let's just talk about medical research is being pushed. So again, big bureaucratic nonsense, whatever. For the first time in forever, psilocybin and other psychedelics are being tested medically. Other illicit substances are too, and I say illicit in the government term, not necessarily in my interpretation of them, but these are things that definitely have the ability to be used as tools in society. Whether or not you personally think they should be available to everybody, I think it's universally agreed that there is science that suggests that they could help people. Whether or not I don't even care about that. There is science out there, and there needs to be more of it done so that we can get these to the people who need them. People who have seizures, people who have there's a central nervous disorder. I don't remember what the name of it is off the top of my head, but psilocybin is proven to help with that, like tics and seizures and stuff like that. Things like that. People's lives can be changed for the better. I think this is great that things like this are getting pushed through. Obviously, it could always be better, but I think this is a great step forward. So, talking specifically about a couple of groups that I think are doing really, really awesome things, is and the first one that I think everybody, whether you're an anarchist or you're a minarchist or you're just a libertarian, everybody needs to say thank you to the people over at the 10th Amendment Center. Because, okay, they may not be blatant anarchists, they're constitutionalists through and through, pretty much, what we would consider a minarchist libertarian with some exceptions, but they have been doing some great, great, great things to keep especially federal government. They're a little more lax on state or city localized governments, which is half true, honestly. We'll get into some of that, but especially federal government encroachment into state activities, they've been super, 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 super good on that. They've been really hitting things like government surveillance, police overreach, civil asset forfeiture. Like, these are things that impact everyday American citizens every single day. And they have been fighting the good fight. They've made tons of leeway. I have their website open here, which, oh, sorry, forgot to put the little filter on. I have their website over here, and they have all sorts of great articles that I think everybody should go out and read. Like, they have this one right here: Nullify Government Tyranny in 2020, Harness the Power of Your Discontent. Now, this is talking about their interpretation of a method to, like, it's very obvious, to nullify the existing government overreach in whatever way you can. Just like the title says, it's very good, very well written. Most of their stuff is. And again, I'm not a huge fan of the Constitution. That's just me personally. I think there's a lot of great things about it, but, as an anarchist, I think there are better things than what we have now. And but it's better. I think these guys are definitely a step in the right direction. So I will vocally support the 10th Amendment Center in their actions of protecting us. I mean, they've been taking people to court. They've taken cities, they've taken states. They are fighting the good fight, guys. They're putting their money, donors' monies, where their mouth is. So I definitely appreciate what they do. Please, just go out and read some of their stuff. I'm not saying you have to give them money. I don't think I've ever given them a cent, but talk about them, at least spread the word. Let people know that they exist, because they're a pretty great group of people. Let's talk about the dudes over at Don't Comply. All right, they had another great year. They had, I think, I think they had 3 events. Mr. White could clarify on that, but I know 2 for certain. The latest was Feed the Need, and we talked about that last episode, which was just awesome. Exercising not just Second Amendment rights, because, Constitution, but the right to self-defense and to protect yourself from government tyranny, along with your right to express empathy and be a compassionate human being and help those in need. I think that's literally what it means to do what we do and be libertarians and be voluntarists, or whatever you want to call yourself, like we talked about last week. And that's a very grassroots movement. There's a lot of cool guys over there. Some of them, like Ben, and a couple others. We have who was on our show from oh my lord, I've said his name like 20 times over the last couple weeks, and the one time I want to say his name, from Disenthrall, Patrick Smith. Thank you. Yeah, Patrick Smith does a great I don't know if it's just a YouTube channel. I don't think it's released as a podcast, but if you haven't checked out his stuff, do so. This is like the giant plug episode. I'm plugging everybody who's been doing great things and all the great things that have happened. So yeah, check them out. You will learn. If you go onto his channel, you will learn things. What more could you ask for? If you go to Disenthrall and you plug in and you sit down and you actually listen to the conversations that are being had, you will learn something every single time. There's not a single time I've listened to an episode and I've said I've gained nothing from this. So I feel like it's a great use of your time. Even if you just passively consume content, you may pick up bits and pieces that you can take along the way. So yeah, and I'm kind of lumping him in with the Don't Comply group because he does participate in a lot of their activities. I'm not sure whether or not he's like a core member of that group or not, but he does participate actively. So we're gonna go ahead and throw him in that group too. Another group of people I'd like to talk about. This is specifically just shows people spreading the word. We've had one new podcast this year, the same year as me, the people who inspired me to do this show, Dave and Mary over at Liberty Late Night. If you guys have not checked them out yet, you need to. I'm sure every single person who's watching this right now has heard of Liberty Late Night and David and Mary. If you're listening from the podcast, I know there's some of you who are holding out. Go to their Facebook, go to their YouTube channel, like them, follow them. Okay, so here's the thing about Liberty Late Night that, they're friends, okay? And I'm not just plugging them for the sake of plugging them. They serve a very important role in the process of taking people from normies to where we are now, okay? Is Liberty Late Night like as analytical as Disenthrall? No. Are they going to talk about controversial stuff all the time like I like to talk about and, have these super like heart-to-heart conversations? No. But what they are is they're a community. One, that's super important. That's something that a lot of people don't have. And two, they're super inviting people, okay? I've been told that when you first listen to my show, it can be, it's a little off-putting. You kind of have to stick around for a minute to get to the good stuff. It's not for everybody. I totally get that, but I've never heard someone watch David and Mary and say like, that wasn't fun. If nothing else, that wasn't an enjoyable experience watching them, do their show and being a part of the live experience, So if you guys haven't yet, for those of you listening in the podcast or here live now, look at them up on YouTube. Look them up on Facebook and keep them in mind, because if you ever want to give people some easy to consume, entertaining information about libertarianism, anarchism, all sorts of different topics. Larry Sharp was on last week, guys, for Pete's sake. We're talking about, that's a big name in libertarianism right there. So send your buddies that way. I think it will do a lot of good for them to kind of graduate, because we have this issue, and I don't want to get too in depth into this, but I think I do this all the time, and it's something I'm trying to do less. But someone will be like, "Oh, what's libertarianism?" And I'll send them like Spooner's No Treason, the Constitution of No Authority, and that's not a great way to introduce most people into the ideology. I kind of get that. I'm a little weird in the fact that if someone brought that to me, I would appreciate it. But most people are not wired the same way that I am. So I accept that. And having places to go like David and Mary is awesome. It is fantastic for the whole community. It is fantastic for the chain of progression of people moving across libertarianism. And you know what? Even if, let's say you quote unquote, I don't want to make it sound like this because it's not like you outgrow their show. I know tons of people who enjoy content from higher caliber, if you want to put it that way, or higher brow shows like mine or like Disenthrall or something like that still love David and Mary. I watch them like every week. So, you watch them. They're good. So that's enough of that. Great show. Check them out. One more show that I want to talk about is The Gold Standard with Alan Mosley, which is being rebranded into, you guys got to help me on this one. It's Too Late, I believe, is the new name. Can someone confirm that for me? Either way, Alan Mosley hosts this show every week. Yeah. It's Too Late. That's what I thought. Okay. And it's pretty good stuff. If you are looking for somebody who maybe wants a little more of that, he's got a sense of humor about him that I think people really appreciate. He has a lot of really cool guests. Ron Paul's been on before. He's a great member of this community of content creators that I think honestly doesn't get as much clout as he kind of deserves for the effort he puts into it. But I think that'll turn around here pretty soon. He's doing some really great things, and I think you guys should check him out. Sherry Voluntary does Postcards to Somalia with him, who you should also look up as well if you haven't yet. Sherry's been on my show twice, so if for some reason you're not following her, obviously she's doing something right. So, yeah, but Alan was on a few months ago now, and you should definitely check his stuff out now that he's going to be doing this rebranding soon. They're kind of changing up the format. I kind of like how things are looking, the kind of shift in perspective that's going on, and so I think that is a great place also for to send people. If you think like stuff like this is too echo chambery or maybe too like a lecture, that's fine. You send people to Alan, you send people to Liberty Late Night, then that is, those are two places that you can send people that are very entertaining, very informative, very well spoken, and fun people who you can send them to hang out with. And they all do live shows so they can feel like they're a part of the experience. I think David and Mary have kind of like got the live show format down where they really engage with the audience a lot. So if you think people would more enjoy being active participants, I'd send them there. If you think people would more enjoy being passive, send them there. But I think that's something I'm going to try to do more, is when people say like, oh, hey, we got this, that going on. What's up with this libertarianism thing? Then, or this volunteerism or anarchism or however I present it. Then I think I'm going to start sending people to. I mean, I've already been telling people like, hey, go check out Liberty Late Night. Like, these guys are fun. And then even whether or not they agree, most of the time people come back and they're like, yeah, that was pretty fun. It was pretty cool. Those guys are funny. Drink a little bit on the stream and have a good time. It's whatever. So everybody seems to enjoy it. So, but yeah, that's enough of jarking off all my friends. I think it's really, again, I've talked about this last week. It's really easy for us to look at at the year and just look at all the bad things that have happened, all the things that have not gone the quote unquote voluntarist, libertarian, anarchist way. And, so sometimes you just gotta take a step back just for a few minutes. That wasn't very long. We just kind of blasted through it. We didn't dwell for too long, but it's important to step back and look at what you've accomplished, because it's really easy to look how far you have to go and say, oh man, we're never going to get there. But when you look behind you and you see how far you've come, yeah, I get it. Sometimes it feels like one step forward, two steps back, but there are times where we take two steps forward and go one step back. So, look, Liberty Late Night's in the chat too. And Nightmary's saying, come to Tennessee. I'm thinking about doing it. I just need to get tickets. I'm pretty sure I'm going to do it. So that'll be cool if a bunch of people come out there. Dave's here. Yep. Dave's here from Liberty Late Night. But yeah. So yeah, that's just something to keep in mind. We've been talking about the last couple of weeks, staying positive. We've been talking about keeping a good mindset, presenting ourselves appropriately. It's important to look at the small victories, like these communities that we have built, that have grown, these organizations that have been doing their best to fight the good fight. These people need to be recognized, I mean, we can't just sit here and be like, oh, everything's terrible when we've got people doing good work. They need to be, sometimes that's all people need to hear is like, man, you guys are doing good work. That's important to a lot of people, and I completely understand why. It's infuriating to be working your butt off, especially when it's like for other people, especially like when you do something for other people, then that's, just somebody saying like, we appreciate what you do and don't stop is huge. It's a huge thing. So we've built a small boogaloo band. Exactly. Hey man, You know what? That's better than none. Easy better than none. Not even a question better than none. And Nightmare here says, heck yeah, small victories are victories. Exactly. Did we topple the government and establish a voluntarist utopia where everyone understands the nap and complies with it because they're all well-minded, decent human beings? No. No, we've talked about this for a couple weeks now. You know, we gotta, yeah, it's been, yeah, I gotcha. We gotta kind of temper ourselves, you know, baby steps, guys, baby steps. We're still in the education phase, and the things like the Boogaloo bands, things like Liberty Late Night, things like this show, things like Alan, things like Disenthrall, things like the 10th Amendment Center. These are all things that need to happen. These are good things that need to happen. Without them, we wouldn't be getting anywhere. That's an even better way to think about this. If all of those things that I just mentioned went away, we would. It's a recognizable difference. Like, you may not be able to really perceive what it would be like if these things didn't happen, because we kind of throw ourselves into this idea that, like, the status quo would persist. But the status quo is not persisting, primarily because of the organizations like the 10th Amendment Center and these activist groups that are going out and really causing a stir. And yeah, to an extent, the people who are spreading the word, like us and Liberty Late Night and Alan and Sherry and all those people. And I think it's important that we really take a step back and say, we are doing what we can in our own little ways. Could we all be doing more? I guarantee it. Every single one of us. I promise. Maybe some of the people at the 10th Amendment Center, but I don't think that there's anybody I can think of off the top of my head that's doing everything they can, but that's okay too. It's okay. I think that's important. As long as you're doing something, that's better than nothing. That's all I can ask. Do something. Anything. I don't care if it's putting stamps on Liberty postcards, which most of them, I think, come with like the little stamps like inked onto them now, right? Or am I just crazy? It feels good, man. It feels good. You know, it feels bad meme? It's the opposite of that. I just think it's not appealing to most people who think we should pay taxes to achieve certain things to boost our overall standard of living in society. So you want to talk about this for a second. We have to come to an understanding that I don't necessarily have an issue with anything that taxes get spent on domestically. Let's put it that way. Like, I don't have a problem with the fact that we're buying healthcare. I don't have a problem with the fact that we're paying for poor people's food. I don't have a problem with the fact that we are, improving people's lives who need it. What I care about is where the violence comes in. Okay, I know we're kind of taking a curveball way off into left field, but I want to make sure this is really clear. Okay, I'm not here the kind of person who's going to sit here and say like, man, like I guess the poors are just going to have to starve. I think that it is super. This is why I talk about all the time that we have to educate, guys. We have to educate. The problem is, if I get what you're saying. If we were just to cut everything out today, sorry, my dog wants in. Sorry, guys. Everybody say hello to Trip. Here he is over here. Woohoo! So the problem is that the violence involved. That's the fundamental thing about voluntarist philosophy, right? If you voluntarily contributed a certain percentage of your income every day or every month or bi-weekly or however you get paid to go to whatever you want, it could be to literally whatever you want as long as it's non-violent and doesn't negatively impact people who didn't voluntarily associate themselves with it. So like, say you wanted to contribute to a fund that did Medicare or Medicaid, you're entirely entitled to do so. You just can't force anybody else to be a part of that. And it's not about the fact that I think that people shouldn't support those who need it. I think it's really important that... Hold on. My dog is trying to dig through something. Stop. You want to lay down on this? There you go. It's really important to understand that the issue is the violence, okay? Obviously, universally, I don't care if you voluntarily associate yourself with it. You can't, like, start wars and kill babies and bomb people in the Middle East, which we're going to talk about later. You can't do that. It's wrong. It violates the non-aggression principle, which, whether you agree with the non-aggression principle or not, you believe in reciprocal exchanges between social interactions. So basically, you believe in the non-aggression principle. And if you don't believe in reciprocal exchanges of social interactions, then you believe in your superiority over a person, which allows you to interact above them, which means that you're in some extent a supremacist. So I'm not assuming that. I'm just saying that if you do believe in that, you essentially believe in the non-aggression principle, so we can agree on that point. But he says, I think that if you don't want to opt into Medicare for all system as standards, Sanders has rolled out, it's because you don't like a really good deal in comparison to what we pay versus what we currently get. So there's a really great article that I wish I could remember where it was from. I believe it was Sirens, who's not here, who linked it on her Facebook, and it was written in 1998, and it was about how to fix the healthcare system. Because even then, we've been talking about healthcare for like 40 years, guys. Universal healthcare was first brought up in legislation in like 1984, I think, 85. It's not a brand new thing. It died for a long time, but it's not a brand new idea by any stretch of the imagination. And I think if you read the article, it's crazy because they talk about the same kind of things, but from a completely different perspective, right? Like in 98, health was expensive, but it's not to the same astronomical value that it is, especially pharmaceuticals. Pharmaceuticals over the last 20 years have just skyrocketed. They've disproportionately increased past inflation, past the cost of materials. Let me read this comment. So if someone is not smart enough to see the value but still has the option to take advantage of it, it's not an excuse to not pay such as a road or a pill. Well, first off, if you wanted to create private roads where only people who paid for them could travel on them, you could do that. I mean, there's nothing ethically wrong with doing so. There's private roads everywhere, all over the United States, that are like that. But obviously, you would create this system to where if somebody didn't pay into it, or it had the means to, like, let's say your system was a Medicare or a Medicare for all or whatever that was specifically designed to benefit people who couldn't afford healthcare currently, then, sorry, I was reading your other comment. Then if someone, like, if I chose, and I'm completely capable of paying for my own healthcare, if that were to be the situation, if I chose to not go into your Medicare system, Medicare for all system, and I wanted to use private insurance, I just wouldn't get to use your system. And if your system can't sustain with however many people that opt into it, it's not a valid system. That means somewhere you either had to use monopolist coercion or you had to use violent coercion to get what you need. And that's not ethically okay. The ends do not justify the means. They never have. You should only be able to own a road or private road if you own the land. I mean, okay, I get what you're saying. I completely understand what you're saying. But if someone were to purchase the public land, then which is totally happens all the time. But so he's saying, okay, look right on where you are. You can afford a more expensive health insurance. Sure, yeah. And if I don't want to, and you would rather pay more for it and not cover everyone else, I don't know. I mean, so let's say you came to me with a private solution that said, hey, like, we're going to make you pay more than everybody else on copay, but we're going to support those who can't afford to make these copays, right? I don't have an issue with that. What I have an issue with is someone coming up to me and saying, you're going to pay for these people no matter what, or you're going to go to jail for tax evasion. That's an issue. That's a huge problem. So you're paying more now and people are not covered. There's nothing to suggest. Okay, so again, the only way you're going to decrease prices with Medicare for All is if you use monopolist coercion, which is anti-free market as it comes, or if you use government violence and the courts and penalties and fines as a way of enforcing pricing. That's not ethical. That is not ethical. Yes, everything proves it is cheaper if you use violence to put these standards into existence. Okay? It's not like you just say, okay, we're Medicare for All now, and we're going to charge this much, and it just kind of happens. I have looked into it before. You have to use monopolist coercion, which is why, this is why they want to, so many people, not all of them, want to ban private insurance, because they realize that if private insurance exists as a free alternative, Medicare for All will not be able to get the pricing that they want to reach the tax credit, I guess you could call it that, or the tax burden is what it should be called, that they're advertising, okay? You're not going to get the half-cost premiums if private insurance still exists to compete with Medicare, because private insurance is going to be able to continue doing what they do. Maybe they'll have to make some changes to stay competitive. But another issue is that there's so much legislation that proves, yes, private insurance jacks up prescriptions by 900%, and dealerships jack up cars by 500%, which just gets to my point that just like car dealerships, okay, there's so much legislation that exists to protect the car dealership. We don't even question it anymore because it's been such a thing for such a long time, okay? But why can't Amazon sell you a car, okay? Even if it passed every single regulation, you know, for the what is it? Federal Transportation, whatever it is. I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head, but yeah. So we go ahead and Amazon can't sell one of these because laws exist that say you have to sell through licensed dealerships, which is a specific kind of a business. So why can't health insurance companies move across state lines? Why are they all regionally cut up by state? Okay? Why that's because legislation exists that says you cannot compete across state lines with other companies. That is an issue. That reduces competition. It's designed to benefit the health insurance companies. It was lobbied by health insurance companies. It's an example of government being used against you. Okay? This is a great example of this. Those are two situations where you could be paying less for a better quality product and you're not because government has screwed you. So let's read what he was saying here. Private insurance jacks up prescriptions by 900%. Like, there's always going to be a profit to be made somewhere. So 900%, I'd like to see specifically where that's from, but okay, let's just pretend. The only ones calling it out in the House is AOC. Okay, sure, true. Yeah, sure. Okay, she calls it out. I'm not even going to dispute that. We pay for the research for that medicine, which is paid for by taxes, which are violently coerced, which I don't agree with. So, of course, I don't agree that we should be paying for research for that stuff. It's our medicine? Is it? I mean, I guess you could say because we're paying in taxes for the subsidies, but that, like, also, if we're going to say that's our medicine, then it's our fault, me and you, that, you know, all the people who've died in the last, you know, since you've been paying taxes at your job in foreign wars is also on our hands. So if you really want to go that far, that's the logical step. And they jack up the price to price gouge and control markets. Yes, and mediocre for all fixes that. Medicare for all. See, but I'm not going to stay too long on this because I do want to talk about Iran and I get it, like, you're coming from a different perspective on this issue. You're looking at this from what is going to be the total maximum benefit for society in the most straight line path. And I get that. Okay, I get if you were able to accept the fact that, like, okay, there's going to have to be some violence here. Somebody's going to be locked in a cage or shot or something. But if you could, I can see how you would get to this point. But if, again, this is all assuming that you're running with the ethical conclusion that some government violence is acceptable as long as it benefits the collective. I can see where you would get to where you're at now. But if you're looking at it from the perspective that I am, is that, again, like, it's just like you said, dude. If you're going to be the kind of person who advocates for these things and you say, that is my medicine, then everything that your tax dollars touches by extension is also an extension of you. So if you're okay with that, then cool. If you're okay with your tax dollars being used to subsidize crap education, if you're okay with your tax dollars being used in the Middle East to plow over regimes every few years, if you're okay with the fact that it's being used to, just kill small businesses and be funneled around into subsidies for big businesses and pharmaceuticals, then sure. Okay, run with it. Stay consistently that way. We can disagree and know exactly where, but you've got to realize that you can't have your cake and eat it too. That's the thing about volunteerism, is that it's not always fun, but it's ethically consistent. And that's what attracts me to it. Like, I don't want to sit here and tell you, like, yeah, like, we can't do that, because as much as, yes, as much as it would be such a quick and just like a wave of the pen solution for a lot of people who can't afford health insurance, it's not ethical. Okay? It's kind of like saying, like, we can solve the hunger crisis if we just, like, take everybody's money and funnel it to Africa. Like, is that a super beneficial thing for everybody in Africa to be able to eat that are starving right now? Yeah, 100%. Not going to debate that. But the ends do not justify the means, and they never have. So you're advocating for a middleman between you and your doctor telling you what they will and will not cover. Unless you're going to pay out of your pocket, dude. Beggars can't be choosers, I guess. I don't believe healthcare is a right. It never has been. Okay. Right is a very strong word. Very strong word. Okay. I think people should support each other and be compassionate and empathetic individuals, but I don't think it's a right. I think it's a very big difference. That is not a fair comparison of what is being asked, by the way. I think it is. I think it is a fair comparison, actually, unless you can demonstrate how it isn't. And I'll let you do that, and then we're going to move on to Iran. But I didn't say it's a right. I never said you said it's a right. I just made the assertion I made the statement that I just wanted to clarify. I don't believe it's a right. A lot of people will say the reason that we need something like this is because healthcare is a right, and you have to demonstrate the fact that it's a right somehow, which is why I don't usually use the term natural rights, because natural rights are difficult to demonstrate. Okay, you can make some arguments, but I usually use rights derived from the human condition or socially reciprocal rights, which are much easier to demonstrate. But again, not saying you said healthcare is a right, only that's a very common argument. Don't believe in rights at all. That's completely fine. We can work with that. I think you would believe in mutually reciprocal rights if we went into that rabbit hole, but we're not going to. So, cool. How about we put a pin in that, and we'll talk about healthcare next week. We'll talk about healthcare the whole time next week. I think it's a good one. It's made up. Okay, maybe we'll talk about rights. I don't know yet, but we're going to be talking about one of the two, maybe both. Cool. Okay, so Iran. So what happened? All right, everybody knows what happened. Okay, salami, pepperoni got blown up. I don't even remember the dude's name. I'm not gonna look it up. Don't care. He was a bad person. He killed a lot of people. Great, awesome. He's dead now. Wow. Let's get into what's been going on here, okay? So, out of nowhere, basically, out of nowhere, in the middle of the night, essentially, the signal was given by Donald Trump to go ahead and send the attack over to take out the Iranian general who was in Iraq at the time, was a part of the group that, to give context, had been sieging the U.S. Embassy in Iraq. And they considered him a foreign combatant in foreign soil in a military zone. So there we go. Now, yeah, so this is important stuff. To give some context about this guy, yes, he was involved in a lot of terroristic activities. He was responsible for the death of a lot of people, innocent and military combatants. He was good at what he did. But the Iranian people loved that guy. He was like a military figurehead. He was more like, I'd say he was more like Mattis. He says right here, they looked at how Americans would look at Captain America. It's more like if you put Mad Dog Mattis and Captain America into the same person. And let's just talk for a second about what the issue with killing him was to begin with, okay? So a lot of people are saying, well, they attacked first onto the American embassy, which is why we went ahead and we killed him, okay? So there's some very, very, very cantankerous legal stuff going on right now. I don't know if you guys know this, in international courts, which are debating on whether or not this was considered an assassination of a military official in a non-combative zone, because technically where he was not engaged in any sort of war with the factions involved. So it could be considered collateral casualty, which would at best. So just to give some context, this is also going on at the moment. Military law, especially international military law, is literally impossible to understand. So I'm just kind of relaying what's going on at the moment. I don't think it's going to go anywhere because international courts kind of suck and they don't really do anything. But just to let you know, it's being debated whether what they did was even like morally reprehensible or acceptable within the treaties and that exist in the moment. But haven't our presidents been involved in the killing of innocent people repeatedly? Yes, all the time. He had nothing to do with the issue 250 miles away. It's considered an act of war to kill them, and they will seek revenge for this. So so I'm not okay, so there is photographs of him at the embassy the day of it starting. So I don't know if it's true that he had nothing to do with it, unless I'm mistaken. I don't believe I am. But whether I don't think it matters regardless whether or not he was at the embassy, because I think that the way that I explained this before is that this is like if you went in and tried to burn someone's house down and they shot at you and you shot back at them and said that you were justified in shooting at them as the arsonist. It's high time we've left the Middle East for good. Maybe not for good. Maybe in a couple decades we can come back on better terms. But it's time we left the Middle East for a long time. It's been time, actually, for like the past 18 years. But, it's definitely been for the last 10 at the very, very least. Considering how pretty much everything that... So we could say this starts with 9/11, but let's go back. Let's do some history, guys. Like I was trying to find a good way to bring this up, but I was gonna start talking about how we got to the position we are now, and I think there's no better way than to look at what was really the first involvement with the U.S. and Iran that led to the relationship that we had today. Okay. And so I don't know how many of you guys know this, but in 2013, I think it was, 13, 60 years afterwards, the CIA declassified some papers about how Teddy Roosevelt's grandson in 1953 was responsible for leading 2 CIA coups in Iran. One on the first, it was a 4-day operation in 1953. I believe it was August of 1953. One of them failed. The coup failed. 3 days later, they led a coup which Iran had a democracy, first off. During the election, the CIA toppled the democracy in Iran and put the Shah into power again, which led to the People's Rebellion in 1979, I'm pretty sure. And there's even images of people in Iran painting "Yanks Go Home" on the side of their walls. It was very obvious what was happening. It was very obvious that outside forces were involved in coordinating the coups. The prime minister was put on house arrest for the rest of his life. I mean, it was bad. And this is how the Shah and the Ayatollah Khomeini and all these things, this is how all of these pieces got put into place. And this is what started our relationship with Iran. Okay, really, like internationally speaking, before 1953, we had no significant relation with them to really care about, okay? Before that, they barely existed, pretty much, especially after World War II, when the entire Middle East was, or World War I, when the entire Middle East was chopped up and reorganized, and then World War II restructured all the way up until basically the 60s and 70s, when the borders started getting a little more consistent. So, same thing with Venezuela and everywhere else, exactly. So we have this very long history with Iran specifically about regime change, and we've done it there twice? 3 times? Twice, I think. We've tried it 3 times. We've successfully done so twice. And every time it winds up worse for the people in Iran on purpose. Because we have such a vested interest in Saudi Arabia, and Iran exists as a direct competitor to Saudi Arabia. If anybody wants to know why we have so many problems with Iran, it's because Iran and Saudi Arabia are the 2 competing forces in the Middle East, and Syria likes to think they are, but that's cute. It's Iran and Saudi Arabia, and we've been on the side of Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia buys our guns, we buy their oil. They have all of these. They buy all of these weapons from us. We had like a $5 billion weapons deal or some 1 point something. I don't even know the number. Billions of dollars of weapons have been sold to them. Tens of billions over the last decade. And we also have big treaties, and we've been involved with the existence of Israel since it's become a country. And Israel and Iran have some very deep tensions. So pretty much everything from the beginning had set us up to sabotage Iran. So imagine for a moment if you lived in a country where your nation has been consistently sabotaged over and over and over again by the United States of America for literally decades. Literally decades, okay? And the people who are calling you the problem in every situation, which, whether they've helped their own situation or not, is up for debate. I'm not going to get into that at this moment, but whenever you see them backing the same people who funded the terrorist attack against them, 9/11, just like it was brought up in the chat, or whenever you see them backing your basically strongest human rights violators in the entire Middle East, or when you see them coming in and destroying basically everything you've ever set up, destroying relations you have countries you have diplomatic ties with, it's gonna just push you further and further away. Okay? Since the Cold War, basically, since the hostage crisis, which, does anybody want to know why the hostage crisis happened? Anybody? The rebellion that caused the People's Rebellion in Iran is what it's called. The reason that was brought about was directly sourced to the coups that we instated. And so there was a in, death to America. You remember all that stuff? You remember hearing about all that? That is why we had what could be considered a healthy relationship with Iran up to that point. Was it complex? Was it very much more than very sparse diplomacy and just general stuff to do with the Middle East? No. But the second we got involved with them, and then continuously were involved with the Shah until they were toppled by a revolution, which was also maybe funded by us, but then kind of spiraled out of control, like, I don't know, like the Taliban, like ISIS, like Al Qaeda. Like, I mean, I make the joke, Osama bin Laden's probably sitting up in a penthouse somewhere because he's actually a CIA operative this whole time. He has been since the freaking 80s whenever we hired him to fight against the Russians. But it's, you know, as much as I can't stand Obama and as much as I don't necessarily approve of how the deal went about, the Iran deal was a step in the correct direction. Was it what I would have done? No. Was it a better step than blowing up their generals, putting economic sanctions on them? No. I mean, yeah, I think so. I know so. Actually. My brain just died there for a second. I was trying to read and talk at the same time. I know so. Everybody talks about how Iran had the capacity to build a nuclear weapon with the deal, and you know what? Honestly, you're right. I agree. They did have a lot of ability to do so. Do they have the right to build nuclear weapons? Yeah, actually, they kind of do. Ever since basically the Reagan administration, or actually it was Carter, whenever the hostage crisis started, and then Reagan became president during the hostage crisis. That's right, Jimmy Carter. Wow, that's a long time ago. But yeah, basically ever since Reagan, we've taken this really hard line stance against Iran. Really hard line. We had a couple failed military incursions in Iran, a couple successful military incursions in and with Iran. But I think in the 21st century, this is just probably the most blatant act of aggression towards Iran as a nation, not towards Hezbollah, not towards any of the other organizations that are funded by Iran, which, you know, let's not even begin to talk about the fact that most of the terrorists we fight are funded by Saudi Arabia, so whatever. But this is like a direct diplomatic attack on Iran. And Donald Trump speaks for all of us, whether we want him to or not. Whether you think he's your president or not, whether he's not my president or whatever, his actions reflect us internationally. This is just another issue with this whole unitary executive power that's been pushed since Bush, but started since Reagan and Carter. Really, Reagan is this idea that the president is like this really strong executive in American politics. That's not how it's meant to be, people. If you like, I'm not even a constitutionalist. If you look at how the Constitution is worded, the president is not supposed to be this powerful. He's supposed to be just as weak and pointless as the legislature are for a reason. The power of the presidency is one that can be easily abused, and the power of the commander-in-chief is one that can be abused even harder. And we've seen from literally since Vietnam, we've seen how the military can be used in ways that are not sanctioned appropriately, in ways that they should be. If we're going to have a legislature, at least let them vote, okay? Whether you think they represent you or not, is that not a better alternative than just having someone say, like, okay, wartime? I think it is. I think it is. it shouldn't even matter who's president, really. I mean, honestly, that's a fact of it. Like, the president should literally exist to make sure the ship runs. I don't know where on earth this idea that the president was ever supposed to be the person who, like, quote unquote directed the president's more like a sage. If you read the Constitution, like the wise elder you put in the position to guide, kind of guide the nation, give advice, kind of help direct and push it along, not the spear tip of the nation's progress. That's not how it's supposed to be. You're advocating for total deep state control. No, I'm not actually. That is actually the opposite of what I'm trying to do. I'm advocating the fact that there shouldn't be a federal government to begin with, but if we're going to have one, we should at least have the legislature be the ability, or have the ability as drafted in the Constitution to be the ones who vote for the freaking wars. The president is to lead our generals if Congress declares war. The president doesn't lead generals. Donald Trump doesn't lead generals. Donald Trump says, go blow this thing up, and then they lead the troops. That's ordering. That's not leading. This is my problem with the commander-in-chief being the president. You don't have to know anything about military. You don't have to know anything about any of it. You just say, I want that thing blown up. And then guess what? They go and do it. You tell the joint chiefs of staff figure out how it's going to happen, and then they go and do it. You don't say like, okay, coordinate with this base, and we're going to use this type of ordinance. We're going to drop it here, here, and here because that. No, he just points at the map and says, "I want the guy that's there to go. I want him to go boom. I want it to be the biggest boom you've ever seen. Okay, China, boom, China, boom." That is how it works. Okay, don't try to tell me how the military works. I know how the military works. Okay. The president was given information that this guy was there. He was asked if we could go ahead and initiate the strike on him. And then he said, oh, okay. Yeah, blow up the guy with the brown guy with the beard at the airport. I'm sure he's the only one. Yeah, they also killed like 3 citizens, right? Congress says we go to war. The president tells the generals to start and feed all major moves through his generals who feed that to him. I don't know what kind of military you've been looking at, but one, I don't want the president to be that involved with military efforts. Could you imagine that? Could you imagine if Donald Trump actually acted as like the strategic command for the military? Holy God. 4-dimensional chess. No. Hard pass, dude. Hard pass. Okay? I agree with like everything up to that point. Like, okay, cool. Congress says we're going to war. Actually, the president at that point could say like, can really mitigate how much we do, which I kind of appreciate his ability to be able to throttle back. But I do think his ability to put the gas on should be also mitigated. So they should be able, checks and balances, people. Checks and balances. But the generals are handling the strategies. Then there is nothing for the president to do other than nod his head. Okay, that's all I'm saying. I'm not trying to be like, I'm not trying to like assault you or anything with these ideas. I'm just saying that like, all he does is say, blow it up. And that's it. Like, that's not strategy. Like, you know what happens when an executive tries to get involved with strategy? Okay. And I know this is not like a super, okay, whatever. Stalingrad happens. And if you know anything about the Eastern campaign between Germany and Soviet Russia during World War II, you know that Hitler's involvement in military strategy basically cost them the East. I mean, whether or not they could have taken the East is another thing, but it 100% killed them faster. So, oh God. Okay, whatever. I'm gonna press. Dude. Blowback. This changed my life. Yeah. Nobody likes to talk about that. Actually, Ron Paul, I think, got booed for bringing up the idea of blowback. And This is definitely something that I think is becoming more palatable. But see, something that I have a big issue with whenever it comes to whether or not something is seen as like having potential blowback or being a violation is whose person is in office. That's something that really bugs me. Like if a when a Democrat was in office, any sort of act of aggression, the Republicans were right there, like, oh, you're trying to start a war. Now that Trump's in, it's the exact opposite. The Democrats are like, oh, you're trying to start a war. I think it was Ben White posted it. He said, it was a post that was like, oh, glad to see all the, oh no, it was Bo Wright. I'm sorry. Glad to see all of the pro or anti-war Democrats are back after their however many years of slumber. Welcome back. Hope you're here to stay this time. Do not count Obama as a Democrat. Okay, regardless, it's just mind blowing, man. Mind blowing. You have to have some kind of principle when it comes to foreign policy. A lot of people are really wishy washy. Like, oh well, this country that supports terrorists and has very minimal human rights and doesn't support democracy, that country's bad. But this country that supports terrorists and has very minimal human rights and doesn't support democracy, that country is okay. That's not how it works. And again, when we have this giant monolithic federal government that rules over everything, it makes it really, really, really easy for one person, for one amazing human being to go out and just blow it up like China. They're gonna say, wow, I've never seen an explosion that big. I got into a debate with somebody that claimed that the Iran attack was in self-defense. And I think if there was ever going to be a compelling argument to say that it was justified, that self-defense is it. But I think it's still a bad argument. Okay, the arson analogy that I brought up, it's not a bulletproof analogy. Okay, I sucky analogies are part of the show, people. Okay, welcome to Liberty After Dark. But I think it's probably the best way of putting it, right? He said, well, according to the non-aggression principle, because this person is a libertarian, if you were to shoot this person outside of your home, the arsonist, so to bring back the situation again, for those who might have forgotten, if you shoot at an arsonist who's trying to burn your house down, and that person shoots at you, is the arsonist justified in shooting back at you for you defending your property? Okay. Move that over, take that person back. Oh yeah, it's big brain time. Hey, Jimmy Neutron, what's up? I loved your show back in the day. um, God, what was I saying? Jesus. Yeah. So he said, well, if the arsonist was at home, which the embassy is pretty much it's considered sovereign soil inside of Iraq, and we're talking about Iran right now. The biggest thing Jesus, man, I keep throwing myself off the train. God, I promise I'm gonna get there, guys. Every time I see a comment, I want to address it, but I gotta just get through this. He said, well, if the arsonist is home, the non-aggression principle says that you can't just shoot him because then it's an escalation of aggression, and justice should be done. You should have yourself. What's the word I'm looking for here? The general was a guest of Iraq. See, I didn't know that. That's interesting. But, you're not able to shoot him. It would be an escalation of aggression. And I said, okay, cool. All right, cool. What if the arsonist put a little tent in your home and said, this is my home now. You can't shoot me because I'm home. That's the exact same idea as people going and taking this idea of the embassy of an aggressor in a foreign area as that somehow being like a safe space, like, oh, can't touch me now. I don't know. I think it's a very government way of looking at things. How about that? No Boogaloo boy would say like, "Oh, my government says this is a sanctioned safe zone." No Boogaloo boy would care if somebody says that. Yeah, we are the aggressor. I 100% agree. I've said, this whole talk has just been about how we have no reason to be upset for them attacking our embassy because we've literally been screwing with them for the past 6 decades. This, in my opinion, was like the easiest way to get off. If this is all that happens, if this is how it ends, cool. This is the easiest way to get off. Let's just go. Let's just get out. Let's just scoot away. That's some deep state stuff, bro. There's a lot of deep state stuff going on. There's a lot of deep state stuff. Jimmy want big boom? Jimmy hopefully won't get any big booms, man. I'm going to be completely honest with you. There's a couple ways that this ends. I could honestly, I think that it's pretty obvious that if the U.S. were to de-escalate now, I think this is the best chance we have at maintaining like any sort of, well, diplomatic relations are shot, first off. Like they have been for weeks, months, actually, since we left the Iran deal, which we did an episode on that. But I think this is the best chance that we have of like it not escalating. However, if we are to continue this line of action, it's very, very obvious that we could escalate. Very, very obvious that it will continue to escalate. Axe-wielding maniac says Iranians are the aggressors. I think 60 years of history would say otherwise. Actually, Jesus, man. 53 was... Jesus, 67 years ago? No. Yeah. Oh, God. Wow. That's crazy. Let's not pretend we ever got along with the Russians, though. Yeah, so I didn't even get into that part of this. Like, everybody is like, oh, well, look at Iran teaming up with China and Russia. Like, China and Russia are bad, right? I'm like, okay, well, yeah, they do bad things. They do lots of bad things. Okay, I can agree with that, I guess. Why is Iran teaming up with China and Russia? Well, maybe because we've alienated them and toppled their regimes and threatened them and put sanctions on them for the last 60 years. Man. I think it's... Really, man. I mean, like, it's once you start putting the pieces together, it's not that hard to see how this all strings together, right? And whether we like it or not, especially if you're someone who supports the idea of a continuation of the style of government we have today, we are responsible for this, okay? Now, if you are someone who separates yourself from all of that, maybe you can say, like, okay, I'm hands off here. I don't do this, whatever. Like, I'm not associated with this. I could accept that. All right, you're fine. But for everybody else who's a part of this machine, and willingly so, this is on your hands. So, what are your views with the Dems giving money to Iran, plus high-ranking Dems having strong ties to Iran? Well, I don't really like the idea of a representative having quote-unquote strong ties with any foreign nation. But I mean, I'm not a fan of subsidies at all. Foreign subsidies. I think, again, we talked about this earlier, but in the context of healthcare, I don't think that the fact that we are helping people is bad. I think the fact that the money that we're giving away is stolen from the citizenry violently, and that's where the issue is. So, maybe if they didn't kill your civilians and have living standards, then there wouldn't be such an issue. Yeah, well, maybe if we didn't turn their countries into parking lots every couple of years on a pretty standard rotation, then yeah, maybe we wouldn't have such an issue. I read a really interesting paper. I think I talked about this the last time we talked about Iran. And it was basically tracing like how 9/11 can be directly sourced to World War I. And I think there was so much interesting stuff about how we, as the West, okay, I'm going to use the super royal we, not even the U.S. royal we. The Western civilization has just screwed the Middle East, okay? Just screwed the Middle East for the last 100 years, actually. Actually, more than 100 years now. It's 2020. Over 100 years have we screwed the Middle East. So, they're terrorists who threaten American allies and assets. So are Boogaloo Boys. So were the founding fathers. They were terrorists who threatened British allies and assets. I mean, it's all perspective, man. It's all the perspective, okay? Does Iran fund terrorists? Yes. Did they do bad things? Yes. Was the guy that we killed a bad person? He probably was responsible for the deaths of a lot of people? Yes. Does that make us the good guys? No. No, it doesn't, okay? These things can all be true, all right? These things can all be true. Let's see here. The founding fathers were patriots. They were terrorists, dude. I don't know who axe-wielding maniac is, but, like, I'm not saying they were wrong. They were right to do so. But what do you think the British people thought of them as? Their founding fathers in the revolution was no different than, like, Al-Qaeda or the Taliban trying to take control of Afghanistan. Granted, they had completely different motivations. Sure, fine. But, like, functionally, what they were doing is the exact same thing. Okay? Like, says who? Says anybody who can objectively look at it, all right? Don't put these people up on that high of a pedestal, man. Like, they tarred and feathered tax collectors. Like, that's pretty metal. Like, that's pretty metal. Does it make us bad is the question, though. Does it make me and you bad? No. Does 60 years of us screwing over Iran because we wanted to destabilize the region make us bad? Yes. That makes us bad. You're a redcoat? No, I'm not. I already told you I supported them. I supported I think the revolution was justified. They got fat oil, though. Yeah, they do have fat oil. That's half the reason why. Also, I haven't even talked about this either. Iran has a central bank. How many other countries have massive central banks that have influence over entire regions? Anybody? Yeah. Not very many. I'm not going to tread too far into conspiracy theory territory because I think there's enough history here that we can literally just talk about the history of the relationship between the U.S. and Iran to see where all of this predicates from. But pretty sure everything we did throughout empire building has made us not just bad, but evil. Evil's a really strong word. I don't know about evil. I think I'd settle with bad. Either way, bad's not good. So I'd like to be the good guys. We had a really good propaganda machine for the Cold War and the pre-Cold War era, like the 50s and 60s, whenever we were involved in all of, I think it was Hungary. I think there was a revolution over there. The communists tried to come up in Hungary and we crushed that one. We did all of the Middle East, basically. We orchestrated everything that was involved over there. What is the worst case scenario in your view with Iran? Total war. I think all-out war is the worst case scenario. How likely is that? 5%, 1 to 5%, somewhere in there. I don't think it's very likely. If we continue on this path, every time we blow up another person or another Iranian convoy, it gets a little bit more likely every time. And eventually we're going to cross a threshold where I think it's more likely than it's not. Right now, though, I think I don't think it's very likely. The treaties and the alliances between China and Russia and Iran. Look, guys, World War III is a war that nobody wins. And I think everybody realizes that. So I think at worst, I think what's more likely is we see Iran develop into a proxy war where Russia and China are funding heavily Iran and we wind up with sanctions. Yeah, so this is my realistic scenario. I think I think there is a chance of like a proxy war going on, kind of like in Afghanistan, but this time where other big powers are involved, because China and Iran have China and Russia have a vested interest in Iran existing in the region. So I could totally see us being deployed for 8 to 10 years again, fighting against guerrilla forces and random well-trained units that may and or may not be directly coordinated by Russia and China. But I don't think World War III is the likely outcome. I think it's much more realistic that we have smaller incursions. Just a question of if Putin or Trump got a better pullout game. Yeah. Well, again, World War III is... Nobody wins World War III, man. I think most... Man, I gotta really watch my words here, because some of these people who run these countries are crazy and are easily manipulated. Powerful people usually are. But do you believe that there are sleeper cells in this country? I can guarantee you for a fact that there's Russian spies. Like, do you guys remember in like 2016 when we just like randomly surrounded a compound full of Russian espionage agents and just like sent them all back? Does anybody remember that? It was like 24 spies or whatever. They were like doing social media stuff. Do I think they have like sleeper cells designed to, start striking internally in the country? It's not out of the realm of possibility. I'm not trying to fearmonger here. There was a big fear that Al-Qaeda had sleeper cells in America, and they talked about them all the time, but not really much came out of that. So I think we have to see who radicalizes, or if the current culture allows for people to be radicalized that hard. I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know if the U.S. is a acceptable climate of that. Because I mean, who's going to radicalize to Iran? I mean, seriously, I don't know. Who knows exactly, right, Mary? Who knows? I can give predictions. I'm also the guy who said that Tulsi Gabbard was going to be the front runner, which, to be fair, she was for a couple months, but now she's not even in the race. So, am I a foreign policy expert? No. Do I feel like I have a pretty good understanding of the nuances of the situation here? Yeah, I feel like I do. Do you know of the heavy ties with the CAIR, Hamas, and Hezbollah? Yeah, Hamas and Hezbollah, you can pretty much just, at this point, you can just smash them together. They've pretty much operate as extensions of each other. The Iranian revolutionaries are a lot more complex as far as they're more like how the Iranian revolutionaries are more like how ISIS started, which was as a subset of Syrian rebel factions that were funded by external sources, which then branched off and became ISIL, which became ISIS after they got kicked out of Al-Qaeda. The winner of World War III will be America. Yeah, I mean, maybe, or we'll all die. Has state chapters in all 50 states. That's interesting. I didn't know that. ISIS is a Mossad operation. A Mossad operation? I don't even know what you're saying. Hold on. What does that even mean? What wizardry are you speaking here? I've never heard the term Mossad operation. Oh, you're talking like the actual person. Okay. I was like, what the heck is going on here? I was like, is this some kind of military term I've never heard of? No, okay, you're talking about the actual person. Where can I get a map and timeline of all this? I need it on paper in front of me. See, I really wanted to do, like, over here onto the side. You can't see where my mouse is, but, over here onto this side, I wanted to have, like, a map up and use my little stupid pen and go, oh, look, see, this is where this and this and that. I can I'll post them on Facebook. How about that? There are good maps of like how the Middle East has changed and just Middle Eastern history, modern Middle Eastern history since like World War One onwards. Really, you need to know pre World War One. So you need to know fall of the Ottoman Empire up to. But yeah, I'll post some stuff on the Facebook page with context for things in the about the Middle East, and I'll post things like the article, the CIA. It's actually you can listen to it. It's about how the 4-day coup happened, the 2 coups. But yeah, the war is for Israel, USA versus Iran. I don't know if it's for Israel. I think I see. I don't know if it's just me wanting to stay kind of away from that line of thinking, but I don't know, man. Israel is not as powerful. Everybody says it like Israel has us by the balls, and I don't know, man. I think that's a bit of an overstatement. Could we be doing it in a continuing interest in Israel and Saudi Arabia being the dominant powers in the Middle East so that Iran doesn't come up? Like, okay, we blew up all of basically the important parts of Syria, so they're out of the game for a few years at least while they rebuild. That helps the vested interest we have in Israel and Saudi Arabia, but then we have Iran here, who's recovering even through economic sanctions, has been recovering, especially since they were in a big slump. I think it was like 2012 through 15 was when the Iranian economy collapsed. Someone can cite me on that if I'm wrong there. I don't want to I'm kind of just throwing numbers out. I think that's about right. But, yeah, so I think just saying like, oh, this is about Israel, I think that's oversimplifying. I think there is more nuance to this. I'm not saying that we don't have a lot of vested interest in the maintenance of Israel. Israel is a big projector of American influence in the Middle East. 100%. Now, how much of that is motivating Iran versus trying to destabilize Iran to promote them? I think that's more. I think that's more interesting, honestly, or I think that's more accurate to what's actually going on, personally. But yeah, I mean, I think we've kind of pretty much covered everything from as many angles as possible. We've kind of gone over the history. We've talked about interactions. I got a feeling. Are you an axe-wielding maniac? I got a feeling you might be. There we go. Yeah, so I think, yeah, we had a little surprise healthcare conversation. We talked about the small victories we've made for liberty over the last year. 52 strikes incoming from Dr. Trump. Hopefully not. I really hope not. That'd be a big bad news bears situation there. So I'm just a fan for disengaging from pretty much everywhere, not just the Middle East, but obviously we want to stay somewhat involved as long as the United States as a nation exists. We can't just disappear diplomatically. But as far as military is concerned, I don't think anything over there is worth another American soldier dying for, whether or airman or pilot or corpsman or any of those people. Nobody. So, thanks for the time, bud. Good con. Thanks, buddy. Yeah, it was good. This was a good one. My dog is, look at him. I don't know what he's doing. He took his blanket off of his bed, and now he can't decide where he wants it. So, he knows I'm talking about him now. See, he's just making it into a big old bundle. He's such a cutie. Does Red Bull give you wings? I've never gotten wings from Red Bull, but I also haven't tried to get wings from Red Bull. So who knows, man? Maybe I'm just missing that particular perspective on how to properly consume Red Bull, or what I should be benefiting from by having Red Bull. Yeah. All right. Well, I think this is good. I think this is a good point to go ahead and stop. So if you guys enjoyed the show, make sure to subscribe, give it a like, hit the little bell icon. You guys have heard this a million times if you've been on YouTube before. I'm not gonna do that too hard. We have a podcast. It gets usually it comes out within a couple days of the show airing. I'm behind. I got to do the show from 2 weeks ago, but you know, all the holidays and stuff, it kind of got in the way. So I will be doing that a couple of days here, and I'll also do this one. But yeah, you can check out the podcast on every major podcast distributor over at Liberty After Dark. Find us Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, all of it. And if you really like the show, just to break even on the costs of the software that I use and buying all this equipment and everything, I'm just asking if you really enjoy the show, you can shoot me $1 over on Patreon, Liberty After Dark. No pressure. We're just trying to get to the point where we break even. So every month, it's just me freely producing content. The only thing I'm paying is my time for you guys from editing and doing the show. So I think that would be a good place to be. Yeah, I think that's it though. Make sure, like, comment, subscribe, leave a review, tell your friends. It was good having you guys out. Anybody have anything else before we go? Anybody got anything? I know the chat's super quick. Let's see how fast you guys can type. Nothing? All right, cool. Hour 35 minutes. I guess that means we were like live for like an hour, 20 something minutes. Cool. All right. Well, I'm going to go. I'm literally about to close this and then I'm going to start editing. So it was fun. I think this was a fun conversation. It's Second Amendment time. There we go. Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to end this. I mean, the podcast portion's already over. So, yeah, I mean, whatever. We could just hang out and talk for a minute. But, yeah, good job, VA stuff. Yeah, cool. Thanks for coming out, guys. I know some of you guys are new here, so if you haven't been to one of these shows before, that one was a little more. I'm gonna try to get some guests on in the future, but that one was a little more history oriented. I mean, there was a lot more like let's talk about everything leading up to this. A lot less like ethical theory. I mean, we had some of that with the healthcare stuff, but I don't think you guys were all there for that. But you know, if you guys, if you guys enjoyed it, maybe stick around, check out some of the older stuff. The most popular podcast that I've done yet, besides the interview podcast, just like lecture style, was the consciousness one. It gets the most downloads and views. I don't know. I guess people see the title and they're like, what is this about? I feel like I need to redo it because I don't think I did it justice. I think the more reading I've done now, I feel much more confident to speak on the topic personally. And I feel like I have a much better case for why I believe what I believe. But maybe that's something we'll do in the future. I already said next week. Actually, I forgot to say this. If you guys want to go look at the Facebook group, we have a community group. I'm going to put a poll up in there to see whether you guys want to talk about rights next week or whether you guys want to talk about healthcare. Unless I get a guest for next week, in which case I may make one of those topics into a video and then post that. So we'll have to see. But yeah, I think that's where we're at. Owen from the War Room might do an interview with you. I'll write that down. Yeah, put that. Oh, dang it! I keep hitting this stupid thing. Whoops! It's so bright. I hate this thing. Oh my god, it looks so bad. Yeah. You know, and we don't always talk about war either. I don't want to make it sound like, yeah, that's all we talk about. But all of it. Do all of it. Yeah. Eventually we will. I just, you know, I gotta kind of plan things out. So yeah. Because, you know, even this episode, like I had to do research outside of just even recording. I had to go look and read and see what all of this was, especially with Iran being such a short notice topic. It's kind of like, man, I got to figure out like, so it kind of helps that we did an episode on Iran before, but there were things I didn't even know about some of the things that happened with Iran. So this is kind of like an update to that. But if you want even more context, you can go listen to the All About Iran episode. I don't remember which number it is, but it's called All About Iran. It's on the YouTube channel. It's also on the podcast, and that should give you also some context. That was right after we left the Iran deal. So I talked about the Iran deal. I think I would change some things that I said. I think I say that every time I talk about an episode. But, that's just part of the growing. I went back and listened to some of my earlier stuff, and I was talking about, like, episode 1, I was talking about how there should be, like, maybe like a nap enforcement squad. And I was like, I look back on that, and I'm like, whoa there, little buddy. Whoa there, little buddy. You got a lot. Whoa, man, that was just skip the first like 3 episodes. Everything else after that, I think, is relatively solid, mostly, anyways. So, good stuff though. Yeah, this was fun. All right, I'm gonna get out of here. I gotta blow my nose and drink some water and all that nonsense. So it was awesome having you guys out here. I hope I'll see you guys again next week, same time, Saturday, 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central for Liberty After Dark, episode 28. We're coming up on 30. It's going to be pretty cool. Take it easy.